Are you able to be happy when others are happy? Are you able to celebrate another person's achievements even if you weren't involved? If so, you have experienced compersion. Welcome to Multi-Loving Model, the channel that shows you how to handle multiple interests, multiple relationships, and multiple approaches to finance. My name is Gerald, and today is going to be a little bit noisy as I am over here helping people to figure out their way through life, love, and learning in order to customize their own happiness. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Don't mind the noise, it's going to be a little bit noisy. There's some construction work going on outside. I hope this video finds you well. If you've been here before, welcome back, and thanks. So for today, we are going to be talking about the idea of compersion. So what is compersion? Well, according to the Urban Dictionary, it is a term coined by the Carista commune, a feeling of joy when a loved one invests in and takes pleasure from another romantic or sexual relationship. And it differs from candolism, which is specifically the joy regarding sexual activity of your partner. It is also said to be analogous to the feeling of joy a parent feels when their children marry, or that best friends feel for each other when they are happy in a romantic relationship. When they say happy in a romantic relationship, I'm presuming in this particular regard, they are in separate relationships. So best friend A is in love with somebody else and person B is in love with somebody else. So not quite the same, right? But they are feeling happy for each other's happiness. So now that we've got that out of the way, I want to move into my own definition of compersion. And before I do that, I have to introduce you to the idea of feedback. So what is feedback? As a sound engineer, feedback is something that's really terrifying for us because it could mean that you could actually blow up an entire system. Now, how that works is when you have a microphone and you have a speaker, what's going to happen is when you speak into the microphone signal is going to go through and into the speaker, and then it's going to come out of the speaker. Right? So that's the basic idea. Now, what happens if the speaker is facing the microphone head? So what's going to happen is the microphone is going to pick up a sound, it's going to go through, and it's going to come back to a speaker, which makes it louder. So once it's louder, that louder sound then goes back in the microphone, and it goes back around, and it comes out of the loudspeaker even louder. And now that even louder sound goes into the microphone and comes back out of the speaker, even louder, yet louder, yet louder. And so this cycle continues until the sound gets so loud that you get all that sounds that you get when you have a concert that's not being controlled very well. You get a lot of these kinds of sounds. So that is the concept of a feedback loop. Now, how is this relevant to compersion? Here's how. My own definition of compersion is that it is the skill to mirror or to feedback the positive emotions that your partner is experiencing so that you increase their happiness along with yours. It is a different story when it comes to negative emotions because that is you want to demonstrate empathy, you want to feel for the situation, but what you want to do is instead of reflecting and causing a feedback and possibly leading to a downward spiral of depression and doom and gloom, what you want to do instead is you want to absorb it and then you want to deflect it away, right? So it's a slightly different skill. Compersion is specifically relating to the positive emotions of your partner. And some of you may be wondering, isn't compersion supposed to be the emotion, the feeling of feeling happy when your other partner is happy? Well, yes and no. Here's why. The main reason is because even if you're not feeling positive when you're doing the reflection, right? So when you start off, it may come off as a bit clunky, you may not feel very right, but if you're making the consistent effort to try to reflect the positive energy of the other person back onto them, like for example, if they're talking about, that cake was amazing, you're going, yeah, that cake was really amazing. How did that make you feel? Oh, that's amazing. Oh yeah, I totally figured that you could have experienced something, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a kind of positive outpouring, even if you don't feel like it. Because if you repeat something long enough, it becomes habitual, and the brain is very, very unique in the sense that the things that you do on a very consistent and constant basis it eventually starts to encode it, starts to change it, such that it becomes more natural to do. So eventually, by practicing mirroring and feeding back the positive emotions, you will start to feel those positive emotions too. You do not start out feeling the emotions and then feeding it. Rather, over a period of time, after feeding, a lot of times you will start to receive some of that positivity back for yourself. So that's why I don't necessarily equate compersion with feelings so much as a skill that can be practiced. So for example, if my girlfriend received a promotion at work or she received a raise, right? I can actually reflect that positivity back onto her. I can feel happy for her even though I may not necessarily directly benefit from that increase. So that example is a bit less obvious. Here's one which is a bit more obvious of the practice of compersion. If my partner is happily talking to me about her other partner, and I choose to reflect that positive energy back, I am practicing compersion. Why is this even a thing? Why is this necessary? Why is this a good thing to actually have? So I like to take it back to so-called the human condition. If you look at children, right, their natural state is actually selfishness, right? And here's how that goes, right? If they see someone happy, they either feel left out or they get jealous that the other person is so happy. And so they do one of two things. So either they try to take that thing for themselves. So if it's a toy, for example, that's making the other person happy, they try to snatch it. They try to take it away from the other person. The second option that they do is to try to make the other person unhappy. If, for example, the other person is happily skipping along, they might stick their leg out to trip the other kid. And that, in general, leads to a net loss of happiness because the other kid's going to be unhappy, and then the other kid, and then this first kid who did this horrible stuff to this other kid then becomes unhappy because there are mirror neurons that are firing and they're reflecting that unhappiness back. By inflicting unhappiness on other people, we actually cause unhappiness to ourselves. So instead, what do we teach children? Right? We keep telling children that they have to share. So they need to share, they need to experience, they need to be happy for the other person, they need to compliment them whatsoever. Now, why would a kid do that? Well, here's why. If the other person is happy with playing with a toy and whatsoever, and then this first kid comes along and instead of bullying them or taking the toy away, they go, hey, that looks really fun, can I join in? AKA, can I share in your happiness? Many times, not all the time, but many times, the other person is going to say, yeah, come on in, share my happiness. Alternatively, if the other person is happy and whatsoever, and you are just feeding back their happiness, they become more happy, and then because of the mirror neurons in your brain, you actually receive some of the happiness that you've been amplifying them with. And so in a sense, we can see this kind of dynamic play out in healthy and unhealthy relationships. In an unhealthy relationship, let's say I saw my partner being happy. What might I do instead? I might try to snatch that happiness, or I might try to bring their happiness down to my level. So for example, if my partner bought, let's say, a new phone or whatsoever, right? I might actually take the phone and use it, or I might even destroy it. Alternatively, I can say, oh, well, that phone's actually pretty lousy, this is not that great. It's expensive, but it's not really that good, you should have taken this other brand, this other model instead. And so by doing that, I'm bringing their happiness down. They were ecstatic about the phone that they purchased, but now hearing me just poke their bubbles, just burst their bubbles all the time, they're just gonna deflate quite a bit. And so what happens is that by belittling them, by snatching away their happiness, you bring their overall happiness down. This in general is a power struggle, and it is competitive in nature, wherein you're just trying to figure out, you're just trying to be the happiest, as if that's really a thing. It's like, hey, I'm happier than you, therefore I win. It's like, eh? For healthy relationships, instead, when I see my partner being happy, I can instead reflect that happiness. I can choose to practice compersion and reflect that happiness back onto her. And by being positive around her, what might happen is that she will overflow with that happiness, and some of that happiness then comes back to me, right? So either I get appreciation, or perhaps she might make me food, or it might lead to a better time later. But overall, this means that it leads to happiness for both of us. She gets happier, and because she's happier, I get happier as a result as well. So instead of a power struggle, this becomes more of a communal struggle, where everyone is fighting together to try to increase everybody's happiness. And it is an entire spirit of cooperation rather than competition. The question that is asked in a healthy relationship is, how can we be happier, instead of who is happier? And this is the point in the video where I want to speak specifically for people who are interested or are practicing polyamory. Let's say that your partner has another partner. So it's me, my girlfriend, and she has another boyfriend. What is your preferred outcome? So let me give you a hypothetical here. Let's say your ideal outcome is that she leaves her boyfriend, but she stays with me. That's the best outcome. The second outcome is she stays with both of us. She stays. Second best. The third best outcome is that she breaks up with both of us. And the worst outcome that is imaginable is she breaks up with me and stays with the other guy. First and foremost, I want you to really consider, what does it mean for you to have these particular priorities? You need to challenge yourself. Why is it that you need your partner to only be with you and nobody else in order to feel happy? That's not the focus of today's video. We'll cover that another time. But I think it is worth it for you to look at your priorities and to decide for yourself, what does this really say about me? Now, if I want the other guy to leave, I generally have two choices. The first choice is I make my girlfriend so utterly happy that there's no point in her having anybody else in her life. That's the first option. The second option is if I make her feel miserable about her other partner. And that's interesting. Let's first talk about the first scenario, making my girlfriend so completely happy that she's not interested to be with anyone else. Basically, it requires you to have so many resources available on hand to meet her physical, psychological, emotional, mental, and all these other needs. And the other thing that happens is that when you do this, generally speaking, you are constantly living with a fear that they are going to leave, that you need them. And neediness is deeply unsexy. You will end up being dictated by what it is that makes them feel better, right? So if they say, well, I'd rather do this, okay, let's do that. I'd rather not do that, okay, let's not do that. That comes off as very desperate. And desperation drives people out. It's very unattractive. Desperation is not sexy. So what's going to happen is they are probably not going to stay around very long, which is kind of your worst nightmare. So by giving too much of yourself, such that you're catering to her entire whims and needs, wants, fancies, whatsoever, you could very well drive her away from you. So forcing yourself to be everything that she could ever hope for is probably not going to work. Slight caveat to that, if this comes naturally for you, then sure, maybe monogamy would do better for the both of you. It's possible. Just saying. So let's say you decide to go down the not so great route and you decide to bring them down. Here's something to consider. If you decide to pull them down, if your partner is happy with the other partner, if my girlfriend is happy with her other boyfriend, and I'm constantly belittling that relationship in order to bring that happiness level down, how is she going to feel? She's going to feel relatively sad. Comparing the other relationship and our relationship, she's going to feel relatively sad. When does my girlfriend feel sad? When she's around me. And if I constantly cause her to feel sad, What is she going to associate me with? Sadness. So once the pattern is established, every time she sees me, how is she going to feel? She's going to feel sad. And if my girlfriend is constantly happy with her other partner, but she's not with me, she's constantly sad with me, what might she do? She might just leave me. Is that the outcome that I would have preferred? So let's say, on the other hand, I practice compersion instead. If I constantly help my girlfriend to be happier when she's talking about her other partner, how is that going to make her feel? Relatively happy. She's going to feel happier. And so if I constantly give her more and more happiness, what is she going to associate me with? Happiness. So if that's the case, if they associate me with happiness, are they more or less likely to leave? Less likely to leave. Will they necessarily leave the other person? They may not. But if the other person did not practice compersion and he was trying to belittle our relationship, what's going to happen? What is she going to associate him with? Sadness. So do you see? He is causing her to want to leave him. I'm not in this particular case. So that would lead to the absolute best outcome. If the other person practiced compersion, when she's talking about me with him, is she going to feel happy talking about me? If she feels happy talking about me, will she also associate me with happiness? Yes. Is she more likely to leave if that's the case? No, it's not likely. And if this is the case, would you be happier than if she left? You see, this is the ultimate thing that I'm trying to get at here. Compersion is a skill. It takes practice. If you practice a skill constantly and consistently, it will eventually become a habit. By making the people around you happier, you become a more attractive person in general. And in return, you will receive some of that happiness back, which will make you a happier person in general. Practicing compersion doesn't necessarily start with your partners only. As long as it is a healthy relationship, you can practice compersion with pretty much anybody. And by doing so, both parties will be happier for having practiced compersion. So that's a brief overview of what compersion means for myself and what I think could be useful for other people. What do you think about it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments sections below. If you've practiced any acts of compersion, you can let me know as well. Show us examples of how compersion can be used, and not just in a romantic relationship as well. If you think somebody else would be happy to receive this information, why not consider sharing it to them? It'll really help out the channel. And if you want more content on how to handle multiple interests, relationships, and approaches to finance, why not consider subscribing? And you can also hit the notification bell. My name is Gerald, and this is Multi-Loving Model. Be happy in diversity. Cheers.